A machine just asked you for a tip, not a person, a machine. You walked up to a screen, you pressed some buttons, you grabbed your own coffee, and then the little tablet spun around and quietly suggested you add 20% for the privilege. Nobody made it, nobody carried it, nobody smiled at you, and it still wants a cut. This is where America has landed. A country where the self-checkout kiosk that never once looked you in the eye is now standing there with its hand out. And the strangest part is not that it happened. The strangest part is that almost nobody actually wanted it to. Tipping used to be a simple thing, a small thank you slipped across the counter for somebody who took good care of you. Today, it is a system that everyone uses, almost everyone resents, and absolutely nobody seems able to stop. So how did a friendly little gesture mutate into a guilt-powered tax that follows you from the barber to the airport to the doctor's office? The answer is hiding behind one number that has not moved in over 30 years. And once you see it, you will never read a tip screen the same way again. Let's start with how the number got so big, because it did not happen overnight. Back in the 1970s and 80s, the standard tip in America was 15%. That was the good service number, the generous number, the one your parents left on the table and felt fine about. Then it started to climb. 15 became 18. 18 quietly became the floor, the bare minimum you could leave without feeling like a villain. And the average sit-down tip today sits at around 19.5%, with 20 hovering right behind it like the next checkpoint we are all being nudged toward. Here is the part that should stop you cold. Researchers who study this stuff describe modern tipping as a system everyone relies on but nobody likes. And they are not exaggerating. Roughly 63% of Americans say they are flat out unhappy with the way tipping works now. 63%. That is not a fringe complaint. That is a clear majority of an entire country quietly seething. And yet every single one of them keeps paying. They grumble, they roll their eyes, and they tap the button anyway. Which raises the real question of this whole video. How does a thing this widely hated keep winning, year after year, creeping higher and higher with almost nobody defending it out loud? The answer to that starts with a small piece of plastic that completely rewired the way we feel about handing over money. The little touchscreen tablet. You know the one. It sits by the register, and at the exact moment you are reaching for your wallet, somebody spins it around so it is staring right at you. And that simple motion, that little swivel, is one of the most quietly effective psychological weapons ever pointed at a customer. Think about the old way. The old way was a paper receipt and a pen. You could sit there alone, do the math in your head, and if the service was bad, you could leave nothing. Fold the receipt and walk out, and not one human being on earth would know what you did. It was private. It was yours. The screen murders that privacy. Now leaving nothing means physically tapping a button that says no tip in bright letters, while a real person stands 18 inches away watching your finger move. They built a machine that takes the most awkward decision in the room and forces you to make it out loud. And it gets sneakier. The software is smart enough to swap those percentages for flat dollar buttons on small orders. So on a coffee that costs $3.75, it offers you a tidy $3 tip, which, if you do the math, is an 80% tip for a cup somebody poured in 9 seconds. The whole thing is engineered so that saying no feels like a fight and saying yes feels like relief. That tiny hit of relief, multiplied across a year, cost the average American about $454. $454 a year on tips they did not even want to leave. That is not generosity. That is a toll. And once that screen worked, it spread like it had somewhere to be. The tip prompt started showing up in places it had absolutely no business being. Airport convenience stores, where you pull a warm bottle of water out of a fridge yourself. Movie theater popcorn counters, self-checkout kiosks, again, the machines. There are even reports of tip screens appearing in medical offices, which means somewhere in America a person is being asked to tip before a procedure, and you have to wonder what exactly the gratuity is buying. But here is where it gets personal, because this creep did not land on everyone the same way. It split the country, clean down the middle by age, and the gap is staggering. 84% of boomers say they always tip at a sit-down restaurant. For Gen Z, that number collapses to 43. Ask about leaving 20% or more, and it is 49% of boomers against 16% of Gen Z. Tipping a hairstylist? 71% of boomers, 25% of Gen Z. And the easy story here, the one everyone reaches for, is that young people are just cheap. But that is lazy. And it is wrong. A lot of these younger folks are genuinely broke, watching wages that have barely moved while everything else got more expensive. And a lot of them are doing something quieter and more radical than being stingy. They are looking at the whole arrangement and refusing the premise. They are asking a question their grandparents never asked out loud. Why is it my job to cover this person's wages at all? That question hangs over the next thing that is happening, which is quieter and a little sad. The old web of holiday tipping, the small envelopes people used to hand out at the end of the year, is coming apart. It used to be a given that you took care of the people who took care of you all year. Now, only about half of people tip their housekeeper at the holidays. Tips for childcare workers and teachers dropped to 47%, down from the mid-50s. Your landscaper has a 37% shot. Your mail carrier, 27. And your trash collector, the person who hauls away your garbage in the rain every single week, sits at the absolute bottom at 21%. Now, some of that is just money being tight, but analysts who track this found something more uncomfortable underneath it. About 38% of people admit they tip mostly out of obligation, not because they actually feel grateful. They are not saying thank you anymore. They are paying a fee to avoid feeling like a bad person. And when you tip out of dread instead of warmth, eventually you get tired and you start quietly cutting names off the list. They call the result a generosity hangover, that worn-out feeling of having given and given and given and slowly stopped wanting to, which leaves a real question sitting in the air. If almost nobody actually feels generous anymore, then what is all this money really for? Here is the answer, and it is the single fact this entire mess is built on. In the United States, the federal minimum wage for a tipped worker is $2.13 an hour, not $7.25, $2.13. And that number has not moved, not by a single penny, since 1991. Sit with that for a second. The last time that wage went up, there was no internet in your house. Gas was about $1 a gallon, and most of the people tapping these screens today had not been born yet. The way it legally works is this. A restaurant is allowed to pay a server that $2.13 an hour, and your tips are what drag their total pay up to the regular minimum. If the tips fall short, the boss is supposed to cover the difference. But the entire model is designed around the assumption that you, the customer, will fill the gap. So everything you thought about tipping, flip it. The tip was never really a reward for a job well done. The tip is the paycheck. For more than 30 years, you have not been thanking your server. You have been quietly handing them the wages their employer is legally allowed not to pay. The whole warm story we tell ourselves about generosity was covering for a payroll system the rest of the world would find insane. And the moment you understand that, the entire map of America stops making sense in the best possible way. Because if tipping were really about generosity, the numbers would be random. They are not. They follow the wage. In states like California and Washington, where that $2 loophole is banned and every worker gets the full minimum wage straight from the boss, people tip less, around 17.8%. The pressure is off, so the wallet relaxes. But go to the states still paying that rock-bottom tipped wage, and people tip more, like they can feel the gap and are instinctively reaching to close it. Delaware, where the tipped wage is a measly $2.23, has the highest restaurant tips in the entire country, 22.6%. West Virginia and New Hampshire are right behind it, both over 20. Think about how strange that is. The places where workers are paid the worst by their bosses are exactly where customers dig the deepest, which means millions of Americans, without anyone ever telling them to, are sitting at dinner tables doing the restaurant's payroll math in their heads and quietly adjusting their own generosity to patch a hole the law left wide open. The kindness is real. It is just being aimed at a problem the customer did not create and cannot fix. So you would think, naturally, that the workers stuck at the bottom of all this would jump at any chance to escape it. And in 2024, the state of Massachusetts gave them exactly that chance. It was called Question 5, and on paper, it was a gift. Kill the $2.13 sub-minimum wage, force every restaurant to pay its servers the full wage directly, protect the lowest paid workers in the state. Clean, progressive, obvious. And then came the part nobody saw coming. A huge number of the servers and bartenders the law was built to rescue came out swinging against it. They campaigned to keep the broken system because here was their fear. And it was not crazy. If the boss suddenly had to pay them directly, The boss would cut their shifts to afford it, slap a mandatory service fee on every check, and customers, seeing that fee already on the bill, would stop tipping altogether, which would leave them, the workers, with less money than the broken system was already giving them. So in one of the most liberal states in the entire country, the people the measure was designed to save voted to kill it, 64% to 36%. It got buried. That is how deep this thing runs. The trap is built so well that the people caught inside it will fight you to stay there, because the only thing scarier than the cage is whatever might be waiting outside of it. So, let's go back to where we started, to that machine on the counter with its hand out. We argue about this thing constantly. Half the country says tipping went insane because people got greedy. The other half says customers just got cheap, and both halves are wrong, because it was never really about either one. It traces back to that one frozen number, $2.13 an hour, sitting untouched since 1991. For more than 3 decades, instead of paying workers a real wage, the system quietly handed you the bill, and then the touchscreen showed up and turned that handoff into the most efficient guilt machine anyone has ever built. The part everybody calls out of control, it is not a glitch. It is the design. It is the system working perfectly for everyone except the only 2 people actually standing at that counter. The worker, who genuinely cannot live without the tip, and you, the customer, who is quietly furious about paying it, and who, when finally handed the chance to end the whole thing, sometimes votes to keep it, because the alternative is somehow even more frightening. A tip used to mean thank you. Now it means, please cover the paycheck, my boss won't. So the next time a kiosk spins around and asks you for 20% after you served yourself, remember what you are actually looking at. A machine asking you to tip it for existing. And if any of this rewired the way you see that little screen, do me one favor and send it to the next person who is about to tap that button and feel guilty, because they deserve to know exactly what they are paying for too. And if this changed how you see that little screen, hit subscribe, because we are just getting started. And tell me in the comments what you really think about tipping in America.